What isn't there to like about werewolves? They're scary, they're hairy, they're fast, they howl at the moon, their transformations are mostly incredible to watch. I love me some werewolves. So when you tell me that the super creative genius director behind 2018's Upgrade and 2020's The Invisible Man is doing a new retelling of the classic film that came out in 1941, it has two of some of my favorite actors working today in Christopher Abbott and Julia Garner, and it's coming out on his very own birthday and coming out the same week we're getting the first full moon of 2025? I mean, this movie was literally made for me to love it. However, my expectations were not met, and I left my press screening feeling very underwhelmed and extremely disappointed. Now, to understand my level of disappointment, let's revisit the film's origins. A little over a decade ago, every Hollywood executive wanted to chase the Marvel Studios approach and wanted a shared universe. That brings us to 2014, where the Wolfman film was first announced and was going to be a part of the Dark Universe, which was to serve as a shared cinematic universe centered around the Universal monsters. Now, there were some writers attached to the script, there were things moving along until we fast forward to 2017, where Tom Cruise The Mummy released, and let's just say the movie didn't do that well. It was a disaster at the box office. It was so poorly received that Universal shifted its focus completely and killed the universe idea and went back to the drawing board, and standalone films became the main focus if this was gonna move forward. Now we fast forward to 2020, where the success of Leigh Whannell's incredible psychological thriller In the Invisible Man reinvigorated Universal's interest in the monster franchise, but again, remember, this time around they wanted to focus on telling one good story at a time versus making announcements about creating a whole universe. Now, sticking in 2020, after the success of The Invisible Man, on May 29th, The Hollywood Reporter reported that Ryan Gosling was set to star in The Wolfman with the director Derek Cianfrance to direct. However, fast forward to December 13th of 2023, the news came out that Ryan Gosling had dropped out of the project, as did the director, but luckily Leigh Whannell took over as director, and shortly after Abbott joined to replace Ryan Gosling, and the principal photography took place in New Zealand in early 2024. Now that you all know the behind the scenes of the film, let's actually talk about the movie, so with that being said, full spoilers ahead. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I was left disappointed by this film, but I want to start this portion of the video off by talking about the things that I actually enjoyed. First and foremost, despite me not connecting to all of the film's main narrative and its characters, Leigh Whannell's creative skills behind the lens was on full display. Now, me personally, I'm someone that can appreciate trying something different and new to separate yourself as a creator from all the 1,000 other werewolf films that came before. And with that, I thought the idea behind the lore of the werewolf being more based on a virus rather than a curse or having some type of fantastical connection to the creature was something that I found quite unique. Now, with that comes the opening sequence of the film that explains in 1995 a hiker vanished in the remote mountains of Oregon, and it created this somewhat of an urban legend about a virus being linked to the region's wildlife. Now, I do wish the film had spent more time exploring and developing its story, but again, the idea of drawing from real-world anxieties around wilderness disappearances and unknown pathogens was a compelling foundation. Now, something else I liked about the opening sequence was how it did a good job of establishing our main character Blake's backstory with his actual father and setting the stage for Blake wanting to be the opposite of his father if and when he ever had his own kids of his own. The initial dynamic between young Blake and his stern military father Grady really presented some of the film's most compelling moments. The intense, almost claustrophobic tension of the encounter with the mysterious creature concealed within the safety of a treehouse was genuinely effective. However, the narrative's decision to jump 30 years forward rather than further exploring this formative experience and subsequent impact on Grady's character development, and in not showing the aftermath of his father radioing his neighbor and confirming the existence of the mysterious monster, and Grady wanted to protect his own son by chasing it down, but the film again doesn't show us this, and it definitely felt like a critical misstep. Now, the sudden shift to the adult version of Blake immediately juxtaposed with his daughter Ginger, and the forced assertion of his protective fatherly duty felt blunt and lacked much needed nuance. The film's constant repetition of Blake's mantra to his daughter, which was "my sole responsibility is to protect her,"
Are we gonna die?
No, it's
my job to protect you.
For me, became so tiresome rather than having the profound or emotional impact the film wanted, and lacked the faith in the audience's ability to grasp the narrative's emotional core without such heavy-handed exposition. From here, we meet Julia Garner's character Charlotte, where the synopsis has her under Blake's workaholic wife, who I felt was extremely underdeveloped and was a prime example of lazy characterization. The film's simplistic depiction reducing her to a quick phone call about a deadline and the implication of her estrangement from the family felt empty. To me, Charlotte just seemed like a normal working mother trying to support her family financially as they're living downtown in San Francisco, and it was said later in the film that Blake is basically unemployed and was between working gigs, so I don't understand the whole narrative that she was supposed to be a workaholic mother. If the film would have added a more nuanced and grounded depiction of her neglect, it would have been more believable for me. For example, her forgetting to pick up Ginger from an event or being too engrossed in work to supervise her at a park and she gets hurt, while cliched, yes, but it would have established her workaholic tendencies in a manner that was far more convincing and engaging. The biggest issue for me in this establishment of the family dynamic was the failure to develop them further, especially Charlotte, who becomes so important later in the story, and having had spent more time with her internal conflict would have made for a more positive impact for the family theme throughout. Now, speaking positively about the film, even with the flawed family introduction, I do applaud the film's eagerness to jump into the immediate action with them arriving to Blake's recently deceased father's farmhouse and them coming across his childhood neighbor, Derek. Setting the tone when not being out after sunset and the creature abruptly popping up and driving them off the road, we see it scratches Blake's arm, it drags Derek away, killing him. We see Blake frantically leading his family to the house and turn on the generator and barricading the entrance to protect them from the monster outside. It was all great. That's what I was hoping the film was going to be for the next hour or so, but from here, it was just so inconsistent. Now, backtracking a bit and talking about Blake's injury on his arm, having that scratch from the werewolf, that to me was interesting and was intriguing because a lot of werewolf stories involve the biting of the creature to become one, but here it hints at an infection which I mentioned earlier separates itself from the other stories within this genre. This infection added a layer of horror, one that is both psychological but also physical, which was very compelling. Now, this is where I felt Leigh Whannell's directional style shine, and that's his ability to building tension. Now, he's quoted in saying that he used David Cronenberg's 1986 to fly as inspiration.
The movies like John Carpenter's The Thing, David Cronenberg's The Fly.
What is happening to me?
As we see the slow transformation of Blake losing his motor skills and not being able to communicate and turning into the monster that he's trying to protect his family from. Now, while I wasn't the biggest fan of the overall look and the design of the wolf, I do and always will appreciate the use of practical makeup, and I thought seeing the physical transformation was effective, as was the very immersive sound design throughout the film. Now, the actual transformation of Blake turning into the werewolf, while shortly lived, again, the makeup becoming progressively more gruesome was definitely a highlight for me. Now, going back to the sound design, which I thought played a very critical role in the film, it really did a good job of creating an atmosphere of dread and unease with the howls of the werewolves and the ambient noise of the forest adding to the film's immersive quality, and I just wish the film would have spent more time showing us the perspective of the werewolf on the hunt. I wish there was more characters involved, like even the surrounding neighbors getting involved, showing us more of the visceral horror and violence of the beast. However, these technical achievements were not enough to salvage a film that suffered from a weak script and underdeveloped characters. Which brings me into the weakest element of the film, and that's the human element. To me, at the heart of any good movie, but in particularly in the horror genre, is the human connection, caring for the characters. And Leigh Whannell's previous work, particularly The Invisible Man, did a phenomenal job in balancing the genre conventions with a deep exploration of human psychology and relationships. In that 2020 film, The Invisible Man, the horror wasn't just about the unseen threat, but also about the abuse of power and the psychological trauma inflicted on the main character. Similarly, Upgrade in 2018 dove into the themes of identity and control, using the science fiction and action elements to explore deeper existential questions. But unfortunately here with The Wolfman, it just failed to achieve the same level of emotional resonance. Now the characters, while played by talented actors, but to me they just fell flat. They were so one-dimensional and the dialogue between the characters didn't help them at all. Christopher Abbott, who's just a phenomenal actor, he's known for his intense and nuanced performances. He just, to me, seemed to struggle with the character and lack the depth and complexity. Switching over to Julia Garner, who I've been a fan of since seeing her play Ruth in the incredible show Ozark.
If you want to stop me, you're gonna have to fucking kill me!
As I mentioned earlier, she was underutilized. Her screen presence was overshadowed by a script that did not give her character the necessary arc to the story. And while I don't like criticizing young kid actors, I'm going to be honest with you all, I felt Ginger was a distraction a lot of the times in the film. Like, she's playing a 10 or 12-year-old, but she was treated and acted like a 4 to 5-year-old. One of the worst parts for me while watching this man become a beast was the lack of chemistry between our two leads. Not once did I ever feel the love between the two, whether it was in the present or in their past. The relationship was lifeless and further diminished the film's ability to connect with me on an emotional level. The story itself lacked any punch. It was extremely predictable. The film's attempt to juggle multiple genre elements, whether it's body horror, creature feature, home invasion thriller, the domestic family drama, resulted in a story that felt muddled and directionless. The film just relied on familiar tropes and underdeveloped family drama cliches and really failed at offering any new or insightful perspective on the subject. It really lacked innovation and depth, which is so disappointing given Leigh Whannell's reputation for subverting genre expectations and bringing fresh ideas to the table. Now, as we enter the final act of the film, we see Blake now fully changed and wrestling with the primal urges. We get the reveal that the monstrous creature chasing them is Blake's infected father, identified by the tattoo. This could have been a great moment and a surprise. However, this moment fell so flat because it relies on tired narrative device. The unraveling of familiar connection in the wake of violence. This revelation, meant to provoke a sense of horror and dread, achieves instead a feeling of predictable inevitability. If we would have spent more time with them at the start, but instead, it's a narrative shortcut, bypassing the nuanced exploration of legacy and Blake's fear of becoming his own father. Now, after Blake kills his father as a creature, we watch him now try to kill his family, and we end where the film begins, which we're now in the woods again, where Charlotte is told by her daughter that Blake wants the pain to end, which is a nice callback, if I care, to the mind-reading games that they played throughout the film between Blake and his daughter, as we watch Charlotte shoots Blake in the treehouse, a moment that is meant to represent a tragic mercy. Now, even this fell short of a genuine emotional reaction for me. The lingering eye connection is meant to signal a moment of profound understanding, a silent acknowledgement of pain and release, yet it felt so hollow. As we wrap up, I still think Leigh Whannell remains a talented director, and I look forward to his next project.
What would be your next choice?
I think Jekyll and Hyde is a story that hasn't been told in a long time. A recent version of Jekyll and Hyde that really did that story justice, so that would probably be it.
But his Wolfman reboot represents a step backwards in his filmography for me. The film's productional values, particularly the practical effects and the sound designs, are all top-notch, but they cannot compensate for a weak script and unengaging characters. The Wolfman 2025 suffers from a fundamental flaw. It confuses graphic violence with insightful exploration. It attempts to grapple with the themes of inherent trauma and the beast within, but ultimately fails to do so, succumbing to the bare minimum of the horror genre. Now, while I'll put this above some of the bottom-of-the-barrel werewolf films I've seen in the past, and I'll even say it's better than some of the more recent Blumhouse films like last year's Night Swim on Imaginary, but I still can't help but to stress my disappointment by the final outcome. Again, a Wolfman reboot directed by Leigh Whannell and starring Christopher Abbott and Julia Garner on paper was a beautiful match made in heaven. Despite its productional merits, the final product was a letdown, suffering from a weak script, underdeveloped characters, and failure to capitalize on suspense and tension. Ultimately, the Wolfman reboot failed to deliver on its potential. There you have it. Thank you all for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this as much as I did making this. Please be sure to leave your thoughts on the film, what worked, what didn't work. Also, leave your thoughts about the reveals and the ending. Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Now, if you all like these type of reviews, please hit the like button, but also share this video. And if you're new, consider sticking around and checking out my other videos and subscribing to the channel today, helping me reach my next milestone of 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. Now, if you want to support the channel more, please consider joining the channel memberships, where more exclusive content is coming pretty soon. Remember, you all are awesome, stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next video.